It would be safe to say that Lorenz is a character with the most faith in the nobility within the entire Game of Three Houses, even more so than my boy,
Ferdinand von Ayer.
Lorenz not only believes in the ideals of nobility, but is rather apologetically defensive about the system as it's implemented as a whole. At times this can make Lorenz come off as pretty conceited and out of touch with reality because he places almost all of his real-world interactions within the social lens of his role as a part of the nobility. Much like the system of nobility in Fodlan, Lorenz actually shows a lot of the good that his philosophy has to offer the world, despite its faults. And over the course of the game, his black and white perceptions surrounding the nature of society, people, and love mellow out to create a more wise, nuanced, and humble Lorenz. From the very start of the game, Lorenz is primarily concerned with his status within the nobility and the implied duties of such a role within the feudal system of Fodlan. Lorenz takes a lot of pride in being a noble and doesn't make any very good attempt to hide it. But Lorenz cares for the system itself beyond a simple satisfaction with his powerful status within the status quo of Fodlan. Lorenz genuinely believes that the feudal system is the best political structure for the world, and he specifically subscribes to the noble sensibility that nobles and commoners ought to live in a separate but symbiotic relationship. And at the start of the game, Lorenz takes this very literally, viewing nobles and commoners as entirely distinct as the colors of black and white. The best supports to understand this view are really his supports between Byleth and Leone. Through these supports, Lorenz's black and white mindset is directly contradicted by his personal experiences with exceptional commoners like Byleth and Leone that show him some people can have exceptional or noble character despite not being born into the class. Lorenz's completed philosophy at the end of the game actually resembles the concept of noblesse families in the late Republic in Rome. Initially, Rome had a clear divide between patricians and plebeians, just as in Lorenz's initial belief system surrounding the nobility. Roman society eventually allowed plebeians to act politically as long as they proved themselves by entering the noblesse class. Lorenz eventually comes to understand that he can't rashly judge commoners as being unable to equal nobles in importance or exceptionality, and synthesizes a new view that allows him to have more nuance and social mobility. Lorenz's sentiments surrounding the nobility and commoners don't simply stop at political duties. They also extend to his personal perceived duties concerning love. In his supports with Dorothea and Mercedes, Lorenz is initially very clear that he won't deny his noble duties by marrying a commoner girl, which deeply offends both Dorothea and Mercedes. However, eventually Lorenz comes to understand that love can't be so cold and calculating, and that his presuppositions of the value of commoners and their value is fundamentally changed. Lorenz becomes willing to adopt a more lenient stance on life, and moves beyond his limited thinking within a noble and commoner binary. Lorenz's rigidness isn't always a bad thing, however, and can sometimes benefit the people he's around with a different perspective. In his supports with Claude, Lorenz is incredibly critical of him, critiquing his etiquette and ideas because of how they don't easily fit into Lorenz's conception of a leader. However, over the course of their support chain, Lorenz is confronted with Claude's ingenuity and capability when questioning about the politics of the Leicester Alliance. Eventually, Lorenz tells Claude how he's come to appreciate his leadership style, but reminds him that he'll always be there to keep him in check. Even though Lorenz has certain preconceptions surrounding nobility, they do greatly differ from the other nobility-obsessed student of three houses, Ferdinand von Ayer. These supports between the two showcase their affinity for one another because of their shared fixation on being nobles, but they also show the profound differences in how they conceive of their nobility. In their B support, Ferdinand and Lorenz both discuss an event where a nobleman makes a scene in a tavern, and Lorenz presumptuously assumes that Ferdinand is outraged because the noble lowered himself to the commoner's level. Ferdinand disagrees and clarifies that he thinks that there should be more interaction between the two classes. This shows how Ferdinand is less strict about the social relationships between nobles and commoners than Lorenz is, and that their concepts of the nobility have some distinctive differences. Finally, the supports between Lorenz and Manuela show a more vulnerable side to him, and he expresses some doubt in his noble convictions. Manuela finds a poem written by Lorenz and interprets it as being about the unfortunate realities of old age, and ends up relating to it. This proves to be a misunderstanding, however, and the poem is instead about Lorenz's fears that he can't live up to his own lofty expectations, failing his primary duty as a noble. This reveals how Lorenz isn't entirely confident in himself and still doubts himself despite his arrogant demeanor. When Lorenz is introspective, he clearly has the ability to be profound and understanding. This is further displayed in some of his kinder interactions, where he's really able to live up to his ideal image of what a noble is and how he helps build people up throughout these supports. In his support chain with Ignatz, Lorenz recognizes Ignatz's internal conflict between the practical necessities of his profession and his passion for artistry. After noticing this, Lorenz offers Ignatz a position as knight within his court who can practice and refine his artistic talents while fulfilling his practical duties to his family. In his support chain with Raphael, he attempts to pontificate surrounding their relationship as a noble and commoner, but Raphael can't really follow. Regardless, Lorenz's providing acts for Raphael and his sister inspire Raphael to defend Lorenz as a noble to facilitate his providing for his family. Lorenz similarly motivates Hilda in their support chain by getting her to participate more thoroughly in battles than ever before. Lorenz actually inspires Hilda with his earnest acceptance of any challenge presented to him, and Hilda ends up finally getting some affirmation from her brother because she finally actually tried. Then in his support chains with Lysithea and Marianne, Lorenz shows just how patient and kind he can be when he slowly works to understand the trauma that both girls have faced in their lives and eventually causes them to move beyond it. In the case of Lysithea, Lorenz shows her that she needs to care more for herself despite everything that's resting on her shoulders. And in the case of Marianne, Lorenz simply accepts her for who she is and shows her that she is worthy of love and affection. Lorenz is probably the most significant proponent for the system of nobility presented within Three Houses because of how deeply he believes in the political and social roles existing within it. Lorenz serves as an excellent foil to Claude within the Golden Deer route because of how traditional and conservative he is. It actually outlines some of the benefits of the feudal system of Fodlan. Lorenz Hellman Gloucester is certainly aloof and condescending at times, like nobles tend to be, yet he has an authentic sense of kindness and duty that is almost unrivaled by any other student within the game. Despite all of his faults, Lorenz represents the nobility of Fodlan to a T, and his character arc seems to hint at some overarching changes in the sentiments of the nobility, when Lorenz begins to learn that the roles of noble and commoner don't have to be as binary as he initially thought.